Hi, Ed. How are you?
Good. Yourself?
I'm good. Thank you for taking the time today.
Pleasure.
So, okay, let's dive right in. How did you originally get involved with the project?
That's of all the things I've sort of done since probably even like the longest or slowest in development. Colin, who co-wrote the script with me, sort of brought me a draft like 7 or 8 years ago. That was sort of had sort of an essence of the script, but we worked on it together for a while and sort of ended up sitting in Eds Role for a couple of years and then getting pulled out. And at the end of the day, I mean, there was a few sort of like fundamental sort of approaches to the movie that we hadn't figured out. Like one of the main ones being in a movie like this, it was always like the why now? Like why is this stuff coming back to haunt her at this point in her life? And because back then she wasn't a photographer, she wasn't actually searching for stuff. So part of it was just finding the sort of more of the motivation, both in terms of character and sort of thematic, and then just finding the space between a couple other movies I was working on. And I think it was important when we just sort of maybe figured out, okay, if we're going to make her a photographer, and she's always subconsciously been searching for this thing, and then now when it happened, she finally had the chance. So it's been more of a lifelong quest that, because I think what it really comes down to, and I think of sometimes movies that play with either a haunting, whether it's psychological or supernatural, is, how are the people changed by the end of the movie? And what I don't particularly, I don't like them, but what I didn't have a desire to make was a movie where, someone's doing just fine, a bad thing happens to them, they spend 90 minutes trying to fix the bad thing, and then they're kind of basically, maybe back to normal
right
by the end, versus somehow that the experience has actually changed them, hopefully for the better, I mean, depending on the movie, or for the worse. You feel that sort of a sense of like, through sort of, some kind of cathartic trial by fire that has, healed those wounds. And once we sort of figured out a structure that made sense to that, it just felt like there was more of a purpose to actually go on.
Okay. Excellent. Tell me a little bit about the casting process. What was that like?
It's always a bit tricky when you're casting it's a small independent film without distribution. When I was lucky to sort of get Abby attached in July of 2014, I guess, maybe, things came together fair. She was busy. She was shooting a movie so she wasn't free till January 2015, and, we were shooting UN and Prep in April. So once she came on board, it was then really just sort of finding a piece of the puzzle around her. I mean, one of the key things for me is always trying to, as much as possible, cast actors against type and give them cast in a world we haven't seen. And so, the idea of them casting, Justin Long's agent had sort of suggested him, and I liked the idea of it, but I wasn't familiar with any of his dramatic work. I mean, he's hilarious, and I've known him from comedy.
Right.
But, I forget the name of it. He did a small indie a few years ago, and his agent suggested checking that, and I was like, there's this very different side to him that, like, I just hadn't seen because I only know him for, a specific style. So I thought that was, for me, it was really important for a movie like this, when it's a small cast, that I kind of felt like you either had to cast everybody in it are complete unknowns, or like everybody is like somewhat recognizable, because if you just had to have one sort of known actor in a supporting role, you're like, oh, well, that person's totally going to come back later in the movie and be important. But if sort of everybody is kind of on equal footing, then you don't pay any extra attention to one person over another. And there was obviously an intention sort of like red herring sort of bait and switch that we do with Justin. So putting him in that role was, sort of a very deliberate, choice, because again, we're not used to seeing him play that kind of character.
Right. Yeah. Very unique, very eerie performance, but really well made, really well done. But back to Jane, the role of Jane. Were there any other actresses that you considered for the role of Jane?
Well, I mean, you always consider people, and sometimes it's like a bit of the path of least resistance, where, again, when you don't have, if you either got a studio already on board distributing your movie, then it's like, you get people throwing at you in droves. But I mean, Abby is representing the same management company as me, so very, very early on, I was sort of looking through the roster of who we had untitled, and suddenly I was like, oh, she's great. And so, I approached, my manager to reach out to her manager. It can be something like, okay, like having somebody vet you when you don't have a bunch of other resources, becomes helpful. And but she read the script early on, and I think from what I was influenced by, there's a few frames where in the movie where I'm like, man, she really looks like Nicole Kidman than the others, and I swear that is definitely a movie that Trick or Daddy is a movie that made me want to sort of like do anything sort of in sort of a horror genre at all. So that was the movie that was, oh wow, like great performances and like really interesting atmosphere and really interesting storytelling that just happens to be scary, versus being like that sounds too dismissive of the genre at all. It's just I'm not like a capital H horror fan. Like I come at it like I've got just diverse taste. Like other person I'm working in range from like a rock gospel musical to like the sci-fi to like small indie dramas and horror projects. So it's for me it's always like having whatever the movie is it has to start with like grounded character and interesting story, and especially characters. I mean, I come from a background in theater, so like the biggest asset I always had to work with in theater was your cast. You've got time and the actors, and that is the play. So as I moved into film, I think that's always been the asset that I've sort of just really relied upon. So when you have like great actors doing sort of strong character work, that for me suddenly makes scary scene actually scary, because suddenly I'm like, wow, I believe that you're actually in peril, and I feel so much more threatening than just like a cheap slasher pick or something. Right.
So that brings me to my next question. What, in your opinion, makes for a quality horror film?
For me, and this is again just to my taste, it's first and foremost is going to be strong character and performance. Because if you can't believe performance, I can't believe that they're really in shape. I just don't care. I don't invest in it. Sort of like I judge. I'm already actively judging the movie and not buying into it because I don't believe it. But assuming you have that, for me, it really comes down to more about like the management of dread, and the more you can sort of like create a sense of impending doom and impending threat, that's what I find particularly scary, more so than the moment when something jumps out at you. When something jumps out at you, it actually breaks the tension. It actually is a relief in a way, because you're like, oh, I can stop being scared. Does that happen? But until it does, it's much more about this uneasy sense of like fear and threat, and that's where for me the true fear actually. So like once it's once it's getting attacked or whatever, you can obviously still sustain that tension, but there's something about preying on the imagination as long as possible. I personally find much more interesting, because it's both. I guess it's always trying to find movies that stimulate you with equal parts head and heart. And I feel like that kind of tension is, on the one hand, you're emotionally disengaged, but it's also you're imagining what's there, and you're fearing what's around the corner. Where is it going to come from? So I feel like it's a different kind of stimulation than just a straight up, physical, emotional response. Agreed.
Wow. Are there any filmmakers out there that have influenced your work?
I'm sure. Many. It's funny. Like, it always comes back to like, it's almost. The reason I'm fumbling only because it's almost boring to say something like Kubrick, but there is definitely, he is always a reference, and there's a sense of formality to the filmmaking style, and his composition is so exceptional, and and that, I guess, the relationship I had with my cinematographer, they really, composition is such an important thing for me, and the sort of formality of frame, and especially, it's not that I don't use handheld or anything is a fair tool, but it's, as long as it can become so easy sometimes with, I think, since the advent of digital, to just sort of like, just grab a camera and do something handheld, and especially in this, we wanted to, I guess, see the photographer, and because there's a period memory element, we really wanted to embrace a certain sense of formality, both to the composition and light, and there was just a vibe that really, for me, has, I guess, a little bit of a sense of nostalgia for an older style of filmmaking, and back obviously when movies were shot on film. So, The Shining always comes up as a reference, just because it's just one of my favorite movies. But again, the compositions in that movie are just so great. There's dozens of other filmmakers whose work I love, but I think within this genre, that and for different reasons, the others are just two that instantly are always, I think they're both movies that I could feel like I could just always watch. Like if it was on, movie, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to turn the channel. Like, I feel like I could always just step into any part of The Shining and just keep watching it. And I think the same with the others because I find I'm so engaged by it. But
right.
so obviously doing something right. I think you can feel like it's not that many movies where it's the 50th time I've seen it, but I could actually just sit and just happily watch it.
Right. And speaking to that...
I'm so sorry to cut in, but this has to be the very last question. We're running low on time.
All right, last question. All right, and speaking to that, that haunted house story theme, do you yourself, do you believe in ghosts?
I don't know. I mean, probably not in the... I also really into theoretical physics. I think there's a lot of fascinating, explanations potentially for the idea of ghosts, whether it's like connected to like parallel universes or I think I'm sure there's something after that. I'm sure it's not necessarily going to be a dude in a white sheet. But I think there's something fascinating about the idea, where, physics and theology can meet and there's got, find some kind of crossroad between the two.
Great. Okay, well, Ed...
I think, the idea of, like, psychological, the idea of being haunted by psychological effects and memories are to be all the more, actually more terrifying than an actual.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time today. This has been Randy Unger with Under the Radar. Thanks for listening.